Guten Tag! Welcome back to the Wii Tanks How to Mod series. In the last episode, we went quite in depth about the common.carc file, and if you haven't seen it already, I suggest you do before moving on. Oh, and don't forget to grab some popcorn when you do watch it. Yes, it really is that long. For the third episode of this series, we will talk mostly about the Local.carc file. We will talk about the different parts of the minigame that the Local.carc file applies to, discuss in detail how each of these elements work, and how we can perform our custom edits to each of them. We will also go into a few aspects that the Local.carc doesn't directly control, but are still an integral part of the GUI and language elements of the game. This episode shouldn't be as long or complicated as the last one, so let's get started! Before we can make edits to the Local.carc, we need to get the file prepared for editing. This requires extracting the data within out of the file. Now, I have already discussed how we can do this with the common.carc file, and the process is the same for the Local.carc file. So, at risk of repeating myself, I'll just say that I use the wszst command from Wimmis SZS toolset to both extract and import the files to and fro the Local.carc file. If you need specifics on how to do this, please refer to the previous episodes of the series. The one thing that makes the Local.carc different from the common.carc is that the Local.carc contains another archive within it called tank.arc. This file must also be ran through in the same process as the Local.carc file, and after this, we will have our files fully extracted and ready to be edited. Why Nintendo decided to have an archive within an archive is beyond me, but that's just how it is, so we must work with it. After extraction, we see that the archive contains 3 file folders. These 3 file folders each contain a specific element that contributes to making the GUI elements what they are. The TIMG folder contains textures to be used for the GUI elements. They are stored in these .tpl files. To modify these, use Brawl Crate's replace function and an image editor of your choice. Nothing much else to note here. The BLYT folder contains the actual layouts of the GUI elements. They are stored in these .brlyt files. For most modding purposes, most of the changes you'll be making to the GUI elements will be here. You can use Wii Layout Editor to make changes to these files. Well, mostly. You see, for some reason, trying to edit tankfade.brlyt causes the program to crash. So, for that specific file, you can instead use this program called Switch Toolbox. This program can open this file, and contains much of the same features as Wii Layout Editor, although do be warned that it is still technically an experimental release, so you might run into some issues depending on what you decide to mod. For most of my modding on this, I just changed the colors and sizes of certain elements. I haven't ventured much into the more advanced aspects of these files, so do so at your own risk. The last folder, the anim folder, contains animation data on how the elements within the layout files will interact with the screen. For example, notice how the mission complete message doesn't just suddenly appear on the screen. It stretches and fades in, and it's these animation files that dictate how that happens. These animation files are stored in brlan files. Now, there is a reason I haven't modified these elements before. That reason is that editing them is a bit tricky. You see, there's not really a user-friendly way to go about editing these. Only a few programs can even read these files, let alone edit them. As for the programs that can edit them, well, let's just say that you'll absolutely need to read this wiki page about the format first, if you are to even have a clue about how you can make edits to them. There hasn't been much attention given towards modding these, and honestly, I can think of only a very few instances where modding them is absolutely necessary. So for the most part, I would stick away from editing much of these files. But if you must, use Wexo's Toolbox. It's one of the only programs that can even try to work with them. By the way, Wii Layout Editor can read them, but it cannot edit them. And as mentioned before, you'll still have to read and understand what's in this wiki page if you're going to make edits to the file. But if you really are interested in editing these, here's a link to check the page out, and I'll provide it in the description below. And that is really it for this archive. Yeah, Not much else to note here. Like I mentioned earlier, there's not as much to go through with the Local.carc versus the common.carc. But I'm not quite done yet with the GUI elements of the Tanks game. You see, while the layout files do have an option for you to replace the text for certain text boxes, like the mission level and tanks remaining, these won't actually change the text that is used in the game. You see, the actual messages for the game are not stored in the layout files, or anywhere in the Local.carc for that matter. What the layout files do contain are references to what are called message IDs, or MIDs. When the game loads in a text box that contains one of these message IDs, it will grab the text associated with the message ID from a separate file, a BMG file. This BMG file for We Play It is not stored in the Local.carc. Rather, it is stored in an archive called message.carc under the US message folder. You can extract the data from this archive the same way you would with any other carc file, and what you'll have are two files called commonmessage.bmg and partymessage.bmg. Commonmessage.bmg contains general messages for the game, some of which are obviously from Wii Sports. So if anyone had any doubts that Nintendo just recycled certain content from Wii Sports into Wii Play, well, here's the proof. Anyways, what we're interested in is partymessage.bmg. This file contains the specific messages that are used in the game, and not just for Wii Tanks, but for the whole of the game, and even for the messages that are sent to the Wii's message board. So if you want to change the messages for that, you could do that. Now, as for how to go about editing the file, we have two options for how we can go about it. If you wish to not have to install more programs than necessary, you can use Wimmis SZS toolset. The wbmgt command can take the BMG file and convert it to an easily editable text file. From there, you can simply make your edits to the file using any text editor, such as Notepad, and then use the wbmgt command to convert it back to the BMG file format, and you'll be all set. That is the first option. If you wish to use a more user-friendly approach that does not rely on typing commands into a command prompt, you can install ctoolspack instead. ctoolspack contains an internal package called BMG Editor. Using this program, we can directly make changes to the BMG file without needing to convert it to a different file format first. And once you're finished with making edits to the file, you can simply save the new file over the old one. It's as simple as that. Now quickly, I need to mention that while you can make edits to the text in the BMG files, there are some things that aren't easily editable here. For example, the mission and enemy tank count don't use separate MID numbers for each possible number count of missions or enemy tanks. Instead, they use what are called escape sequences. If you've done any sort of coding before, you'll probably recognize what is going on here. In short, the game internally tracks which mission you're on and how many enemy tanks there are, then displays what this value is for the mission and enemy count messages. The problem is that this use of an escape sequence essentially makes it impossible to have custom names for each of the 100 missions. But there is a solution. Recall that Blitzkrieg Tools comes with some programs that help with Wii Tanks modding. While I've previously mentioned what technology and cartography are for, I've yet to touch on what Blitzkrieg nomenclature is for. Well, surprise, this is what it's for. Essentially, the solution to have custom names for each mission is a process called code injection. To make things simple, all you need to do is select which mission you want to change and insert your custom text into the blank area below. Oh, and don't forget to select which version of Wii Play this custom titles is for. Once you've created all the names you wish to use for each mission, you have two options for how to implement the injection into your game, either through CodeWrite ASM or through a Revolution memory patch. Now, I am unfamiliar with CodeWrite ASM, so I'd suggest you go with the Revolution memory patch option. Once you've got that selected, and after specifying the patch ID, you can click the compile button, which will create the proper memory patch data. All you need to do is copy what you see in the right box into the patch section of the XML file for Revolution. We will get to the specific XML file in episode 5 of the series, don't you worry. Now, from what I've read online, it seems that these custom titles won't work with 4:3 aspect ratio. Oh, and by don't work, I mean crash your console, not work. So yeah, don't do that. Also, I've recently found out the Dolphin emulator finally now supports Revolution memory patches, so there's now a way to have these custom titles on emulator, which is just fantastic. although I haven't tested this out myself, so take this route at your own risk. Still though, this is quite remarkable. Today is definitely a great day for the Wii Tanks modding scene. And with that, we have finished talking about the Local.carc file. See, I told you this episode wouldn't be as long as the last one. You should now have a good understanding of the elements that are present in the Local.carc file, along with some other ones, and how you can go about modding them. Also, if you have any extra questions or concerns about the Local.carc, please don't hesitate to post a comment below and I'll see what I can do. In the next video, I'll be going into detail about the file that deals with music and sound elements of the minigame, the rptanksound.bazaar file. For now, thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Au revoir!